Mr. President, 1 year ago, the right-wing majority of the United States Supreme Court overturned decades of established precedent and stripped away the right to abortion in the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization decision. In this decision, the Supreme Court overturned the right of American people to make decisions about their own bodies and their own health. That is why 1 year ago, I filed the Right to Contraception Act with my colleagues, Senators Duckworth, Hirono, and Baldwin, and Murray, and I stood here, much like I am today, to request unanimous consent to pass our legislation. The House of Representatives passed the bill by a bipartisan vote of 220 to 195 at that time. Unfortunately, Republicans in this chamber chose to block its passage. Here is just a short list of what has befallen us since that time. District court judges have blocked teens from accessing birth control at federally funded clinics and taken aim at health insurance coverage for contraception. Extremist state legislators have restricted, criminalized, and stigmatized reproductive care, including by suspending payments for emergency contraception for survivors of sexual assault. And people are left paying more, traveling further, and working harder to get essential medication. The threats to contraception are real and happening now. So I stand here today, once again, to invite every member of the Senate to join me, Senator Duckworth, Senator Hirono, Senator Baldwin, Senator Murray, and the 35 additional co-sponsors to pass the Right to Contraception Act. Because co-sponsoring this bill means that you support codifying the right to obtain and use contraception, enshrining Supreme Court precedent into federal law, guaranteeing a healthcare provider's right to prescribe these products and services and to share information related to them, preventing the federal government and states from interfering with the right to contraception, and authorizing the United States Attorney General, healthcare providers, and all Americans harmed by unlawful restrictions to go to court to enforce the rights this bill establishes, because there is no right without a remedy. Passing the Right to Contraception Act means setting the bare minimum standard that the right to contraception should be protected, even if the Supreme Court once again overturns settled precedent. 9 in 10 Americans support the right to contraception. This is not just a moral duty, but part of our duty to represent the will of the American people. The right to contraception is central to life, liberty, and freedom. This is for every person who wants to live without politicians in their homes and waiting rooms, especially women, Black, brown, indigenous, LGBTQ, rural, immigrant, low-income, and disabled Americans most impacted by the failures of this Supreme Court. With the right to abortion stolen and the right to contraception now threatened, I urge my colleagues to stand with us and to pass today the Right to Contraception Act. As if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions be discharged from further consideration of S. 1999 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. Further, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Mr. President,
Senator from Indiana.
reserving the right to object, this bill is not about contraception, it's about abortion. The bill defines contraception as any drug, device, or biological product intended for use in the prevention of pregnancy, whether specifically intended to prevent pregnancy or for other health needs, that is approved by the FDA. The FDA has approved dangerous chemical abortion drugs that can also be used as contraceptives off-label. There is a huge difference between a drug that blocks fertilization and a drug that can end a life. This bill also includes a provision that would act as a guaranteed earmark for Planned Parenthood. Under the bill, the government cannot directly fund a health organization unless it provides abortion drugs. And finally, this bill does not respect freedom of conscience for healthcare providers. It would no longer allow for religious exemptions for organizations who have deeply held objections to providing abortions. The bill uses intentionally vague language to hide its ulterior motive of protecting access to abortion drugs. For these reasons, I object.
From Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an issue that we're going to return to. Justice Thomas, in his comment on the Dobbs decision, said that the decisions made by the Supreme Court that extended privacy rights were an overreach. This Supreme Court began with the Dobbs decision. It's very clear, because he mentioned it specifically, that the Griswold decision, the decision to, in fact, protect the right to contraception, is also now in the crosshairs of this Supreme Court. So it is imperative that we return to this floor to begin the process of passing legislation to codify this protection for Americans. I yield back